Well, welcome to Conversations with David Ibarra. Today, episode number 4, we're going to have a leadership conversation with former U.S. Attorney John Huber. Welcome to our program, John.
David, it's a great honor for me to be here and have this conversation with you.
Well, wonderful. And, I think that we first met on a panel that the Pioneer Park Coalition put together, and it was discussing what could be done to help our city, Salt Lake City, address lawlessness and homelessness. But before we talk about that, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you. I'm a Utah native, grew up here in Salt Lake County. My parents met down on Kensington Avenue where they grew up. They went to the Old South High School. And then, had a big family, which I was part of, and grew up on the west side of the valley, and loved that experience to grow up and live in a working class community. It's where I still live with my family. It's where I reared my children, because it was such an opportunity to not have to worry about putting on airs. My father was a successful construction company operator, and did very well, especially, when I was at the end of the family. By then, we were doing pretty well. And people would ask him, Ed, why do you live out on the west side? You could probably live wherever you wanted to. And his response, which carries the day for me, was, well, where we live, you don't have to worry about keeping up with the Joneses. You are the Joneses.
Very good.
So, from that upbringing, went to the University of Utah for both of my degrees in undergraduate and at law school. Was on the football team for a short time up there. A lot of life lessons that I learned there, and then settled into public service. I really enjoyed being in the courtroom and being on the side of law and order, public safety, holding offenders accountable, and did that in the state courts and then eventually the federal court of Utah for 27 years. And thoroughly enjoyed it. My last 6 years of public service were as a presidential appointee. And somehow this guy with no political connections in Utah got the eye or the ear of President Obama, who appointed me to be the United States Attorney. And the United States Senate confirmed me. And then there was an election. We have elections in this country, and they have a lot.
Let me ask you, what was the count on the when you were confirmed by the United States Senate? Was it just a raise of hands, yes or no, or was there an actual count?
Well, I like to say unanimous. There was no one objecting, so it was a voice vote. It was
perfect.
I like to say unanimous. That sounds a lot better.
That's good.
And then when President Trump came in and took over, everyone was let go, and I really wanted to continue to serve, but had some good advocates and allies here in our United States senators, Senator Hatch and Senator Lee, who made it clear to the new administration that they wanted me to stay on. And so I was allowed to, and had to be renominated by President Trump, reconfirmed by the United States Senate, again unanimously as a claim to fame, and became the only United States attorney in the country who served both President Obama and President Trump. Of the 93 U.S. attorneys in our country, I was the only one who was able to do that. And it was quite a privilege to see behind the curtain of both administrations, because I had leadership responsibilities both with the Department of Justice under Obama and under President Trump. I got to see the inner workings.
Right.
And it was quite a privilege and experience.
You are kind of proof positive that not every decision is based on politics.
Well, right. And I've never tried to be political.
Right.
It's not who I am. I care deeply about public issues, but to be political and to be partisan is not who I am. I'm more patriotic than partisan. And maybe that was what allowed me to stay on two very different philosophies between President Obama and President Trump. But, I care about issues that all Americans care about. And I guess that's one thing I like to share with people, having seen behind the curtain as an advisor to Loretta Lynch in the last days of Obama, and then being an advisor to Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr under President Trump. people ask, well, wasn't that hard, or wasn't it, like there's something that would be exciting and about that? Well, sure, it was exciting, but it's boring in that a lot of the conversations were exactly the same. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, David, in our country, there's so much more that binds us together than what separates us. So at the Department of Justice, raise your hand if you like drug traffickers. Do you like Chinese spies? How about terrorists or violent crime? All Americans can agree on these issues. So the vast majority of things that we work on in government service, public service, are things that we should agree on.
Well, in largely, the public expect from the elected officials that they elect each year is handling safety. Safety is safety.
Right, and everything stems from public safety. It's like, if not the most, it's one of the most important functions of government to provide safety to the constituents, to the citizens and residents. To provide safety, because if you don't have public safety, nothing else will flow. You're not going to have commerce. You're not going to have free speech. Everything stems from having a safe environment where we can share ideas and share commerce.
Right. And to protect our families. That everybody agrees.
Right. And this was a big emphasis for me when I was able to serve as a leader of federal law enforcement for 6 years. Everyone deserves a safe neighborhood. From my humble working class neighborhood that I live in to our most affluent neighborhoods in Utah, everyone deserves to be able to walk out and play in their front yard and not be fearful of violence, danger, otherwise.
Well, I tell you, I was delighted that President Obama identified the specialized skills that you have in the appointment, and also delighted in President Bush not letting politics get in the way of identifying the specialized knowledge and skills and talent that you brought to the table in the reappointment. Unfortunately, President Biden decided to go a different way, but sometimes when things don't, the reappointment, which there was a lot of us that wanted to see you reappointed for by a third president, didn't occur, but you look for the seed of its equivalent benefit when something doesn't go your way. So tell us about what you found in the seed of your equivalent benefit after U.S. Attorney.
Thank you. When I took the appointment, the political appointment, I knew there would be an end to that story. I gave up my career protected civil servant position to become an at-will, serve at the pleasure of the president employee. I knew the end of the story would be what it was. So I knew I needed to move on. And I'm so fortunate that it coincided with a global law firm called Greenberg Traurig that wanted to open up in Utah, of all places, because of the strong economy here, the great employee base, the talent that we have, our language skills, et cetera. And so they asked me to come over and help them get their office started here. Now my firm has offices from Tel Aviv, all through Europe, all through the United States, Mexico City, and over into Asia with Shanghai, Seoul, and Tokyo. So it's a big deal. And they wanted to come to Utah, and they asked me to be part of that. So I couldn't ask for a better opportunity to continue to work on big projects. But what I'm most excited about now is to help Utah businesses. So where I was in law enforcement and public safety for so long, that safety that we provide enables us to continue to be the strongest nation the world has ever been. And that takes commerce, entrepreneurship, and capitalism, the free market. And so I'm excited to be in a position where I can help Utah businesses succeed at a national level and an international level with this platform that I'm part of now.
Perfect. So as you enter the fourth quarter of your business career, you move from the public sector to the private sector.
Yeah, that's right, and I'm very excited. It's a big shift, David.
That's cool.
It's a big shift, but it's a great opportunity.
Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about our city. For me, John, it feels like, and I'm not saying that I'm always right, but I can share with what I feel. I've lived downtown for 21 years now. I have my business corporate headquarters in downtown Salt Lake City. And I've seen it the first 10 years. Salt Lake City has always been viewed as safe and clean. It's amazing the number of people that would visit from all over America, all over outside of our country, and say, I cannot believe how clean and safe Salt Lake City is. Now, over the last 10 years, and certainly the last 2, this has changed. And now I have a national, I had a high-ranking corporate official come from outside of Salt Lake, and he said, what happened to your city? And people are saying that constantly. What happened to Salt Lake City? The lawlessness, the tent city, and that is everywhere. Our city's changed. What do you think about what you're seeing in Salt Lake City, and having been here longer than me, or about the same time?
Well, it's interesting. I had those same experiences, and they're colloquial, right? It's not scientific, but those same words, safe and clean, were always how people would describe when they'd ask where you're from. I'm from Salt Lake City. Oh, it's such a safe city. It's so clean there. And I was like, well, okay, I guess so. But it isn't something that maybe we don't think about all the time. But you're right. Now, when I travel the country and the world and say I'm from Salt Lake City, there are different responses. And, these people who come in and served in federal law enforcement, having been all over the big cities, and a recent DEA lead agent in Salt Lake, he was very disappointed when he arrived to see the state of our city. And I guess when he said that to me, I hadn't really thought of it. And it reminds me of the metaphor of the frog in the boiling water. You put a frog in water, then slowly turn up the heat. The frog doesn't notice before he's cooked. And I wonder if that happens to us lifelong residents of Salt Lake City, that we don't really notice the change until much later. And in some cases, it may be too late. The water may be boiling at that point. And I'm concerned that our city has transitioned or transformed into something very different than what we had growing up, what my parents had growing up, and not too long ago, actually, not too many years ago, when it would be described as safe and clean. Those compliments, especially the clean part, and even the safe part, they don't come like they used to.
That is for sure. It almost seems that we've all viewed across this nation what's occurred in Portland, Oregon. And Portland, one of the most beautiful cities in America, that today people really avoid going to Portland just because you can visit, and it is absolutely incredibly sad. The condition of the city, the tense communities, encampments everywhere, and the lawlessness. And I'm terrified that are we on a race to be like Portland?
Well, those cities, Portland and even Seattle, if we think back just a year ago, and there was discord throughout the nation, and we saw a lot of protests, we saw a lot of riots, and we need to call things how they are. Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington abdicated their whole downtowns. They became riot zones. Not peaceful protests, they were riot zones. The federal court in Portland, Oregon was under siege, and you had to fly in federal agents just to protect it on a daily basis from the rioters who were trying to destroy it. You had a large segment of downtown Seattle that was like a demilitarized zone. It was taken over, and the police just backed out. And that is, I don't want to compare Salt Lake to that just yet, but it's a natural end to some of our policies, philosophies, and this feigned progressivism that may be prevalent in our city right now. There's a logical conclusion to abdicating responsibility for holding people accountable. I had an interesting experience last week, and I travel a little bit just like you do. And it's been 23 years since I'd been to Dallas, Texas, and I was there on business last week. And as I rolled into town in my taxi, Uber ride, or whatever I was in that day, it was just this beautiful city that laid out before me as I approached. And then when I stayed downtown Dallas for several days, it was just a beautiful, pristine city. And I looked for the same signs that we would have with tents and people in distress and a feeling of unsafety as you walk the streets. I didn't feel it there. Wow. And I was wondering, how could a city as large as Dallas, with presumably some of the same challenges with addiction and homelessness and things like that, how come it's so different? And I want to know more about that, because when I come back home to Salt Lake City, wow, it's a different feeling here, and it shouldn't be that way.
Well, it's interesting. I now that you bring that up, it makes me recall my visit to Houston. I've got a couple of big projects going on in Houston, Texas right now, so I visit and I stay near the downtown area, and I go for a walk every night and every morning, and I'm walking the city, and what I noticed different, I'm looking around, and here's Houston that at one time had a very bad reputation for its downtown, and I'm looking down at the sidewalk, it's clean. So I'm looking further as I walk, it's clean. And then I notice there's nobody laying in the street, passed out. Mm-hmm. And then I walk further, and I see 2 police officers patrolling on foot, 2 together. I look further across the street, there's 2 on that side, walking the city, getting right in the mix of it to make sure that there's comfort. And then I notice on a Saturday, there is a gentleman that is sweeping up the streets and cleaning the streets, and I walk up and talk to him. He shares with me at one time that he was homeless and that we clean the streets 7 days of the week because there's garbage 7 days out of the week, and we take pride in our city. A transformation had taken place because it had become an objective, and actions were put into motion, and nothing happens until an action's put into motion.
I really like what you said there. There was an objective, and they worked towards a goal. And I am concerned when I hear people say this problem is so complex that we can't begin to solve it, whether that's right, addiction or chronic homelessness or resource-resistant homeless populations. Look, we live in America. There have been a lot of complicated and complex problems that we have solved for ourselves and for so many others in the world.
Right.
That we can't have that attitude. There needs to be an objective that we can make a difference. Yep. And we can get the right people in the right room, and we can set the objective, and then we can move towards it.
In the leadership consulting, performance management consulting that we do all across America in my firm is one of the things that I tell executives and in the interviews that I have with them, what is it that you're in search of? Why is it that you called me? What is the main gap that you're experiencing? And we discuss it. One of the things that I share with them is the first thing you have to be careful with is what you think. If applied management and leadership is what's the gap, what's the objective, what specialized talent do you need to bring on to resolve it, but you have to believe. Applied leadership is what you do. And one of the things that I get concerned about, and many people think that I am absolutely anti-Mayor Mendenhall. I'm not. I supported her. I wrote her a check for $3,500. I am hoping that she can overcome what I view as the very, very lacking components of her leadership style. I feel the same way about Chief Brown. I believe he lacks creativity, and he's one that I would prefer to see not continue. But as I talk about both of them, we need them to both be successful. We cannot have our city go 2 more years on the same course. So in the conversations I have, I want to make it really clear to anybody listening, I want Mayor Mendenhall to succeed. And if she succeeds in the next 2 years, she should be the next mayor. I would love to see that happen because we all succeed. But I would tell you, the one thing that concerns me, John, is when I hear the reasons we didn't being articulated. We had a pandemic. We had an earthquake. We have a lot of things in leadership that are going to come up, and leaders find a way to overcome what's the objective, what's the goal, what's the purpose, and then make it so. It seems to me that our current leadership wants to talk about why it didn't happen, to lower the expectations of Salt Lake City to meet the performance level that they've been able to deliver. And I don't believe it's achieving our desired end result, safe and clean. Tell us what you think we could do different.
Well, let me first say that I am a big fan of Mayor Mendenhall and of Chief Brown, and I have, particularly with Chief Brown, a long-standing partnership and friendship with him, and so I need to lay that out.
Sure.
That being said, going back to your concept of leadership, there's a mantra out there that I've kind of adopted that the difference between managing and leading. It's a pet peeve of me to say I'm a manager. A manager is someone who takes care of office supplies.
Right.
A leader is someone who sets the tone and leads people towards that goal. And every organization needs a good, strong leader, and that, in most cases, will make all the difference, from the leader of our nation to the leader of our city, to the leader of our business or an agency. A good, effective leader will make all the difference because it will bring the people around to rally around to solve the problem and to handle difficult circumstances. The good parts of what Mayor Mendenhall has done is the first time in history. So I was a federal prosecutor for 19 years. And in the course of that, I tried year after year after year to strengthen our partnership with Salt Lake City, and always hit a brick wall, particularly when it came to the mayor's office. I had measured success with connecting with the police department over those years to solve violent crime issues in Salt Lake City. But it was Mayor Mendenhall was the first mayor who had the guts to step up and partner with a Trump-appointed, at that time,
right,
United States attorney to take on violent crime. So I give her a lot of credit for doing that. Chief Brown and his predecessors, that's a difficult situation to be in, to be an at-will employee, to serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and could be fired without cause at the drop of a hat. And the chief of police is a very tough job to enforce the law and to please the mayor at the same time. So I don't want to step into their shoes because I'm not in their shoes. That being said, look, there's this false sense, and call it politics, call it philosophy, Salt Lake City, this yearning to be something that they perceive as progressive and compassionate. I think there's a false sense there, a false view of progressivism, to say that we should not enforce laws in particular areas, whether that's chronic homelessness, trespassing, all the quality of life crimes that go with it. I mean, you call them quality of life crimes. If someone's violating those crimes, it affects your quality of life and my quality of life. But to then just say, let's not worry about that right now. If that's a camping ordinance, let's not worry about that because we might be challenged by somebody in the enforcement. That is an incorrect, and it's not a compassionate, it's not a progressive philosophy to say, let's just let people live in addiction and squalor and unsanitary conditions and affect their own quality of life and ours. That's not progressivism. And so I think there's this feigned sense of duty to some illusory progressive concept of not enforcing the law. You have to enforce the law. It has to be a baseline. So when those riots overtook many municipalities, big cities last summer 2020,
right,
we had our own problem in Salt Lake City. And the rioters, not protesters, not lawful free speech advocacy,
right,
full-on criminal rioters who were damaging businesses, looting the 7-Eleven, overturning a police cruiser and torching it in downtown Salt Lake City. How can that happen? That's the natural conclusion of this false sense of progressivism, that we'll just let people be people and do what they want. That was a dark day in the city's history and in Utah's history. And I took it upon myself to say, oh no, people will face the consequences. The offenders will face the consequences for violating the law. And just days later, we found the arsonists. We held them accountable with federal charges that have meaning and actual repercussions. And I stood on the police plaza with its shattered windows with Chief Brown and other law enforcement leaders, and I said, this cannot happen in Salt Lake City. Right. It will not happen. There was a deafening silence from other leaders, whether that's the district attorney elected by the people or city officials higher than the police chief, because they were afraid. Right. Because this obeisance to this progressive God that you cannot speak strongly about public order and be sympathetic and progressive at the same time.
You know, it's really interesting when you hear liberal or progressive. Now, it's not a secret that I'm a Democrat, and it's not a secret that I'm a left of center Democrat. It used to be a lot of us. Doesn't seem to be a lot of us anymore. But to be progressive used to mean we had an idea that we could articulate, an initiative, an objective, a goal that would make the lives of others better. But when you hear the word progressive today, it doesn't come with any goal. I have no idea what it means today, because it's a feeling of I can selectively determine what laws are on the books that are enforced. And I believe that we're off course in for instance, addressing the shelter-resistant population. We're going to allow tents in public space. And how much of 911 calls go to that population that would prevent Chief Brown from ever being able to have a best-in-class response time to 911? But when I hear that we want a goal of 10 minutes, but best-in-class is 4 minutes, boy, it just doesn't seem like we're thinking big, or we want to be great. We want to give in to ordinary. That's just not Salt Lake City to me. I remember the conversations that we had that led up to this initiative of your partnership with Salt Lake City, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is that the invitation was given to Chief Brown to talk to Mayor Mendenhall to have a conversation with you. Am I off base on that?
No, you're right. That was how that came about. We had, over the previous 2 years, partnered with Ogden City,
right,
who, for being a small town, has some big city crime problems in Ogden City. And we entered into a partnership with them called Project Safe Neighborhoods to enable them to have consequence and meaning to their repeat revolving door offenders in their city that were really bringing down the city's quality of life. The result of that 2-year endeavor was a 19 to 25% reduction in violent crime in the city.
Right.
The mayor and the city council essentially gave me a key to the city in gratitude for the partnership that led to instant, objective success. So, yes, it was during a panel discussion when I was still the U.S. Attorney that was posed. Why can't we do that in Salt Lake? It was a short time after that I connected with Mayor Mendenhall and Chief Brown, and we launched that same model in Salt Lake City. Like I said, the first time, even though we've approached them many times, and success breeds success, so they saw what we did in Ogden, and they wanted to do it in Salt Lake.
And I always, your class act, John, in the press conference you had on that day, you gave reference to the Pioneer Park Coalition panel that I hosted, that the idea to bring Ogden to the city was discussed, and you made it happen. And the reduction, though, was a 1.7% reduction in crime. Why do you think there was such a big difference between Ogden at 18 to 20 and Salt Lake 1.7?
I'm not sure, because I'm not there anymore. I've stepped down and resigned from being the U.S. Attorney at the President's invitation. And that's a nice way of saying you got fired.
Yeah.
So I'm not there anymore, but I know that the dedicated professionals in law enforcement, the Salt Lake Police Department, those are heroes.
Yeah.
Those officers out there, and their partners with them, the Utah Highway Patrol and the U.S. Marshals and the ATF agents. They're heroes that keep us safe at night so we can sleep well. So they're working hard. I don't know exactly why you haven't seen the success in the first, what's that, 6 to 8 months of the project. But I have high confidence in the model and that you'll see continued success. But I did point out, David, like you said, the Pioneer Park Coalition, and that's the power of our constituency, that you still can have an impact on what our elected officials and our appointed officials do and prioritize. So we can affect leadership by speaking up and saying, we want more out of what's going on here. We want the city to solve these violent crime problems. We know you can do it. We want you to do it, and we're not going to be quiet until you start making some success on this. That's the power of the United States of America and grassroots advocacy, and a group like the Pioneer Park Coalition. Hats off to them for making a difference in Salt Lake City.
Well, John, I want to thank you today for coming. The Conversations with David Ibarra is intended to bring truth to power. And I believe in our city that I absolutely believe that the men and women that serve our police department, they know what to do and they know how to do it. I personally believe that we have a lack of leadership in wanting to address the shelter resistant, that until we do, I don't know how it's going to be possible for the men and women that serve to serve and protect our city until that's addressed. And I'm hoping that the mayor will decide to invite a conversation with the governor, the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House to convene and get together and make a comprehensive plan of how we can achieve what our residents deserve, and that is safe and clean again. But I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed the conversation with you, John, and thank you so much for being a guest on our program.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, David. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.